Hello again. I'm Miss Jody with the Literacy Volunteers, and I have another funny story about Winnie the Pooh. Winnie the Pooh gets himself in a lot of adventures, and today he's going to have an adventure with his friend Piglet. So we're going to say, one day when Piglet and Pooh were talking, all of a sudden Winnie the Pooh said, "I think I saw a humpalump today." "What is it?" "Just lumping along," said Pooh. "I saw one once," said Piglet. "At least I think I did. Only perhaps it wasn't." "So did I," said Pooh, wondering what it looked like. "You don't see them very often," said "Not now," said Piglet. "Not at this time of the year," said Pooh. Then they started talking about something else, and it was time for Pooh and Piglet to go home together. At first, as they stumped along the path which edged the 100-acre wood, and we have the 100-acre wood behind me, and you'll see right down there at the bottom is Pooh's trap, because Pooh is going to build a trap to catch a huffalump. They didn't say much. When they came to a stream, they hopped each other across, and they were able to walk side by side, and they began to talk in a friendly manner. They were very good friends. "Okay. Piglet, I have decided something," said Pooh. "What have you decided, Pooh?" "I have decided to catch a huffalump." Pooh nodded his head several times as he said this, waited for Piglet to say how, or what are we going to do, or something like that. Piglet didn't say anything. The fact that Piglet was wishing he had thought of it first. "I shall do it," said Pooh, waiting a little longer, "by means of a trap." He's going to build a trap. "But you'll have to help me, Piglet." Piglet's wondering how. "Pooh," said Piglet, feeling quite happy again, "I will." Then he said, "How shall we do it?" Pooh said, "That's just it, how?" And they sat down together to think. Pooh's first idea, they should dig a very deep pit. And then the heffalump would come along and fall into the pit. "Wait a minute," said Pooh. "Why?" "Why what?" "Why would he fall in?" Pooh rubbed his nose with his paw, because he does that a lot, because that's when he has to rub his paw. He might be just walking along, humming a little song, and looking up at the sky, wondering if it was going to rain. And he wouldn't see the very deep pit, and he would fall halfway down. Then it would be too late. Piglet said that was a very good idea, a trap, but suppose it was already raining. Pooh rubbed his nose again and said he hadn't thought of that. Oh, then he brightened up and he said, if it were raining already, the heffalump would be looking up, wondering when it was going to stop. But by then it would be too late, and he would fall in the trap. Piglet said that now that the point had been explained, they thought it was a very cunning, very intelligent idea. Pooh was very proud when he thought of this, and he felt that the heffalump was as good as caught already. But there was just one thing which they had to do, and where would they dig this very deep trap? Piglet said that the best place would be where a heffalump would be, just before he fell into it. Only a little bit farther on. But then he would see it. Not if he was looking at the sky, said Piglet. He would suspect, said Pooh, if he happened to look down. Then he thought for a long time. Pooh thinks a lot. It isn't as easy as I thought. That's why heffalumps hardly ever get caught. That must be it, said Piglet. They sighed and got up, and when they got a few prickles out of themselves, they sat down again. If only I could think of something. And sure, he thought of a very clever brain. Pooh thought he had a very clever brain. If only he knew the right way. Suppose you wanted to catch, how would you go about it? He said to Piglet. Well, said Piglet, I should do it like this. I should make the trap, and then I should put a jar of honey in the trap. And you would smell it, and he would go in after it. And I would go in after it, said Pooh excitedly, very carefully, not to hurt myself. I would get a jar of honey, and I would lick around the edges, pretending that was any more. Yes, well, about that, said, I could catch you. Now, the very first thing, what do heffalumps like? I should think acorns. Oh, wake up, Pooh, because Pooh by this time thought the whole story was silly. Pooh had gone happily dream, waking up with a start. And he said honey was a much trappier thing to do. Acorns, Piglet didn't think so. And they were about to argue about it when Piglet remembered that if they put acorns in the trap, he would find the acorns. So, all right, honey then, said Pig, and Pooh just remembered he had some honey at home. Honey, said Piglet, I'll dig the pit while you go get the honey. Very well. As soon as he got home, he went to the larder and he stood on a jar and he took down a very large jar of honey, which was on the top shelf. Now I have the large jar right here. This is what Pooh had his honey in. Said honey. Now he didn't know how to spell, so it said Hunny. That's not the way you spell honey, but that's the way Pooh spelled it. Okay. He took off the paper cover, looked inside. You never could tell. I remember my uncle saying that he once had a color, so he had to check out to see if it was honey. Unless, of course, somebody put cheese in the bottom. So he looked and he looked. He gave a deep sigh. Oh, it's honey, all the way down. Having made certain of this, he took the jar back from Piglet, and Piglet looked from the bottom of the very deep pit. Got it? Yes, but it isn't quite a full jar. So he threw it down to Piglet. And the two of them were in the pit trying to do this. Oh, put the jar in the bottom of the pit. Well, good night, Pooh, said Piglet, and they went off and got to Pooh's house. When we meet at 6 o'clock tomorrow morning by the pine trees, the heffalumps have just got to be in our trap. 6 o'clock, Piglet. Have you any string? Why do you need string? To lead them home. He's going to tie a string around the heffalump. Oh, I think heffalumps come if you whistle. Some do, some don't. You never know about heffalumps. And off they went. Now we have the honey is going to be in the bottom of the pit. And they go home. All night, Piglet went to his house where it said trespassers. Some hours later, just in the middle of the night was beginning to steal away, Pooh woke up suddenly with a sinking feeling. And he had that sinking feeling before, and he knew what it meant. He was hungry. So he went to the larder, and he found nothing, because guess where his jar of honey was? It was in the bottom of the pit. Full jar of honey right at the bottom of the pit. Then he began to wander up and down, wondering, what am I going to do? Very funny. He murmured to himself 3 times in a sing way. He had to get and put it in the cunning trap to catch the heffalump. Bother, he said. It comes to trying to be kind to a heffalump. But he couldn't sleep. The more he tried to sleep, the more he couldn't. He kept counting sheep, which is sometimes a very good way. But that was worse, because every heffalump that he counted was making straight for the jar of honey and eating it all. For some minutes he lay there miserably, but then he got the first 587th heffalump. He was licking his jaws, and he said to himself, very good honey. He said, I jumped out of bed and ran to the house, straight to the 6 pine trees, because I guess he's looking for, they must be right there, right above the trap. See the 6 pine trees right there on the map? The very deep, he found the pit. In the half-light, the pine trees looked alone, and the very deep pit seemed deeper than ever. And Pooh's jar of honey was at the bottom. Something mysterious, a shape, no more. As he got nearer to this, his nose told him, indeed, there was some honey in that pit. And his tongue came out and he began to polish with his mouth, ready for it. Bother, said Pooh, as he got his nose inside the jar. Now, we know what Pooh does. He's looking at the putter, and he's sniffing. Guess what he does? He gets his head stuck in the jar. Bother, said Pooh as he came inside. A heffalump has eaten it. I forgot. Indeed, he had eaten most of it himself, but there was little left in the bottom, so there he was. By this time, Piglet woke up, and as soon as he woke up, he came this way, and he said, yes, there's something in the pit. Maybe it's a heffalump. Was it fierce? Did it come when it whistled? He found it. There was no pigs at all. It was a fond of pigs. He didn't know what that was. Supposing it was fierce with pigs. What if Pig had a grandfather? He didn't know how to answer any of these questions, and he was going to see his first heffalump in a little bit. Of course, Pooh would be with him. Heffalumps were very fierce with pigs and bears. Wouldn't it be better to pretend that he had a headache and not go? Then he had a clever idea. He would go very quietly up to the 6 pine trees, deep and very carefully look into the trap and see if it was a heffalump in there. So off he went. At first he thought that there wouldn't be a heffalump. And then he thought maybe there would. Oh dear, oh dear, oh dear, said Piglet to himself. And he wanted to run away, but somehow he got near. He felt he must just see what a heffalump looks like. All the time, Winnie the Pooh had been trying to get the honey jar off his head. The more he took it off, the more tightly he said, "Bother," he said, inside the jar. "Oh, help," he said. "Ow." He tried bumping it against things, and he couldn't see, and he bumped it, and he bumped it. He tried to climb out of the trap, but as he couldn't see. It had his head in the jar. So that very moment, the Piglet looked down. Now, Piglet looked down in the pit, and this is what he saw. Pooh upside down with his head in the jar. "Help, help," cried Piglet. "A heffalump, a heffalump." And he scampered off as hard as he could. "Help, help, a heffalump." But he didn't stop crying until he got to Christopher Robin's house. "What's the matter, Piglet?" said Christopher Robin. Now we have Christopher Robin. He's going to come into the story. There. We have everybody here with Pooh with his head in the jar. "Hef, hef," said Piglet, breathing so hard. "Hef, we got a hef." "Where?" "Up there," said Piglet, waving his paw. "What did it look like?" "Well, it was hard to say. It had a big head, because all he could see was his back. A great big enormous thing, like a huge, like a jar." "Well," said Christopher Robin, putting on his shoes, "I'll have to go look." Piglet wasn't afraid if he had Christopher Robin with him, so off they went. "So I could hear," said Piglet anxiously. "I could hear something," said Christopher Robin. And it was Pooh bumping his head against a tree root and in the pool. "There," said Piglet. "Isn't it awful?" And he held up Light and Christopher Robin's hand. Suddenly, Christopher Robin began to laugh. And he laughed, and he laughed, and he laughed. And he laughed, and while he was still laughing, crash went the heffalump's head against a tree root. Smash went the jar, and out came Pooh's head. Now I'm going to have a little, there we go. So there's Pooh with his head out of the pot. Then Piglet saw what a foolish piglet he'd been. He was so ashamed of himself that he ran straight home and went to bed with a headache. So he left the story. Piglet's left. But Christopher Robin and Pooh went home for breakfast together. "Oh, Bear," said Christopher Robin, "how I do love you." "So do I," said Pooh. Again, Pooh had another adventure, and who saved him but Christopher Robin? So Christopher Robin got him out of the jar, and Christopher Robin and Pooh went home together. So if you enjoyed this story, we'll have a few more, because Pooh always has an adventure. So thank you for coming, and if you like it, share it with people and say like, and we'll tell you some more stories. Thank you.